All right, everybody, welcome to today's biological and biomedical sciences seminar. I'm Dr. Shelley Thomas, and I'm going to do a little bit of introduction first, and then I will turn it over to our speaker. Just a reminder that we have a seminar series. There's several coming up in the next few weeks. So next week we have Dr. Kelly Smith coming in, and she will be talking about biology beyond undergrad, navigating the pathway before, during, and after graduate school. She is a Rowan alum. She graduated here in 2013, and she works for Symbio. And then on April 16th, we have Dr. Tanya Alderetti coming in, and she will be speaking on exploring the intersection of environment and early life physiology using multi-omics approaches. And then on April 23rd, we have Mr. Kane Holland coming in. He will be speaking on nature access for all, making New Jersey's natural spaces more inclusive and accessible. And we do have some other seminars that are still being arranged too, so I'm looking forward to all of these. We also have tomorrow a big panel and networking event through URISE. It is the Career Paths in Biomedical Fields, and that is from 12:30 to 3 o'clock p.m. in the Student Center, room 123, and then a panel discussion is from 12:30 to 1:45 with a networking time from 1:45 to 3. So I encourage you to attend as many of these as you can. And I would like to now introduce today's speaker. Dr. Trish Miller is a senior research wildlife biologist and executive director of Conservation Science Global. It is a nonprofit based in Cape May, New Jersey. She received her BS in biology from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and her MS and PhD in ecology from Penn State University. Her research focuses on movement ecology, habitat selection, and understanding conflicts between raptors and human activities, all in an effort to inform conservation and management. Trish caught her first golden eagle in Nevada in 1998 and has been fascinated by them ever since. For almost 20 years, she and others in the Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group have been studying this enigmatic population, with their combined efforts leading to GPS tagging of over 120 eagles and more than 25 peer-reviewed publications and numerous technical reports. This work helped unravel the mysteries of this secretive population by providing invaluable insights into their behavior and ecology. Please welcome Dr. Trish Miller.
Thanks so much, Shelley, for both for the nice introduction and for the invitation to speak to you all here. I'm really happy to be here to talk to you all about work that has consumed my life and career for the last 19 years. I did my best to balance both family and career, and quite honestly, many of my familial memories are closely tied to the memories of golden eagles and vice versa, such that the two can almost not be disentangled. I couldn't have done this work without the support of our research team and my family and so many others. But I have to say, most of all, this work has not been done in a vacuum. Oops.
You can just
It just takes one more click. It's off.
There we go. Okay. So this work could only be accomplished by collaborative, and I personally think we have one of the best species collaboratives out there, the Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group. I could possibly be slightly biased. First, I want to give you a little quick orientation of the different golden eagle populations in North America. There's a sedentary population in the Western US, and they breed into Canada and Mexico. There's also a migratory population in Western Canada and Alaska. And then the Eastern population is found from about the mid-continent, about it's defined as 100 degrees latitude, and to the east. When we started this project back in 2005, there was really a question about how many golden eagles there were in the East, how many were individuals there were. And back then, we estimated it to be around 1,000 individuals. Since then, a graduate student at WVU, Andrew Denhart, estimated the population to be somewhere around 5,000 individuals, making it probably the smaller population among those in North America. So golden eagles have been recorded at hawk watches. Those are places that people go to watch hawks fly by during migration, and they count them. And they've been seen at the first hawk watch, which was Hawk Mountain in eastern Pennsylvania. And they've been recorded in the winter in the East for hundreds of years. But for a very, very long time, they were thought to be rare winter residents. Even to this day, people in some areas still consider them to be very rare, despite the fact that we know there are quite a lot of eagles wintering in the East right now. So I caught my first eagle in Nevada, but I saw my first eastern golden eagle when my husband, Mike Lanzone, and I went up to the Tussey Mountain Hawk Watch, which is just outside of State College, in the spring of 2001. And when you're talking about researching this kind of research, being a collaborative, you meet lots of people and they kind of can drive what you're doing. So there we met two people, that would be Dave Brandis and Dan Obalski. They started the Tussey Mountain Hawk Watch, and importantly, they wrote this paper, modeling raptor migration pathways using a fluid flow analogy. So the ideas of these two hydrologists, they're not biologists, they're hydrologists, kind of using this analogy about how water moves is the same way as birds are going to move. They take the easy path. And they did this through the landscapes like the ridges of Pennsylvania. And these ideas would shape our thoughts, our questions, our ideas about golden eagles. And one day in early 2005, I was working on my master's, and I was also working at Powder Mill Nature Reserve, which is part of the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh. And this other guy came to town. My boss said, "You want to study golden eagles? We know this guy who studies eagles in Kazakhstan, and he just started at the National Aviary in Pittsburgh." That was Todd Kastner. These relationships all exist to today. We all work closely together. We just have a paper we're trying to get published on California condors right now, involving Dave and Todd and me and others. So that was 2004. So we had this knowledge from our going to hawk watches that eagles were migrating along ridges of the Appalachian Mountains. At the same time, there was wind energy development was really starting up on those same ridges. So the same places that eagles are migrating, wind turbines are being placed. And we knew from other places like the Altamont Pass in California that when you have concentrations of eagle movements, that you can also have consequences for eagles. So we took the knowledge that we had and decided to study the migratory behavior of golden eagles in the Appalachians to better understand potential conflicts with wind energy. Essentially, what we wanted to know was how eagles were flying in response to topography and weather to help inform that risk. But first, we needed funding. One thing about science is funding is the lifeblood of science. You can't do it without it. Very few projects get done or get done well without external funding of some sort. And the Pennsylvania Game Commission told us that they were really interested in giving us money to track golden eagles, but others had tried to catch adult eagles in Pennsylvania and failed. So we set about to try to capture adult golden eagles so that we could get the funding to track them and help answer our question. So here we are constructing the first blind that we would try to grab goldens out of up on Bald Eagle Mountain, just 15 minutes outside of Penn State, where I was working on my master's, as I mentioned. And later that fall, when I was 6 months pregnant, I skipped my class, and I'm not sanctioning that. And I headed out to the ridge because it was a great west wind day, which meant there's going to be a northwest wind day. There's going to be a lot of eagles migrating in November. And I'm really glad I did, because it was amazing. There were so many birds, and I finally caught one. I caught our first adult eagle that day, proving that we could do it. And this is the bird that started my career studying eagles in the East. And I had no idea at that time that it would consume my life in a very good way, and still does today. I just returned from Maine yesterday trying to trap eagles up there. So 1 year later, funding in hand and Phoebe in hand, we started capturing and tagging eagles. Now we're in southern Pennsylvania, Allegheny Front, and Phoebe hung out in the blind with us, and we made it nice and warm, so she was comfortable at least. And yes, that is a flip phone. This was 2006. And I think the first iPhone came out in 2007. So, but I need to take you back a little bit and let you know where the state of knowledge was at this point. I mean, we had a mission to understand how eagles were flying along ridges and to address that concern with wind energy development. But there was existing a small body of knowledge that we hope to build on to unravel the mysteries of this eastern population of golden eagles. So we knew that eagles had been documented nesting in the Northeast, in Maine, New Hampshire, and New York primarily. There was a man, Walter Spofford, who knew more than anybody, more about golden eagles nesting in the East than anyone else, but he was also very secretive. And so we still don't know where many of these nests are because he kept those as a secret. One push for open source of data, eventually at least. And actually he banded the bird in the nest here, but there's no record of that band in the bird banding lab database. So don't be too secretive. Singer documented nesting and individuals in the Adirondacks in the early 1970s. And he noted that the lack of fire in the region had all but eliminated foraging habitat for goldens. It was also noted that the low productivity of Appalachian eagles and the decline in the fall flight, meaning the decline in the numbers observed during fall migration, bore a very close resemblance to that of bald eagles and osprey, and the disappearance altogether of peregrine falcons. We know that from tests on eggshells in Maine, from the last nest that was there, that DDT was a contributor, at least to the decline of those birds in the Northeast. So we knew a little bit about the winter distribution. Brian Millsap and Sandra Vanna described the winter distribution of golden eagles in 1984, and they indicated that the majority of birds were associated with wetlands. They also described some of the first movements for band recoveries. So these birds would have been banded in the nest of them in Quebec and Ontario and found elsewhere. And so that gave us some insight into where our wintering birds were coming from. And then we knew a little bit about the nesting from surveys that were done by Morneau et al. They were doing surveys for Hydro-Quebec, who were going to be putting in a dam, and they documented about 20 golden eagle nests on the Hudson Bay in Western Quebec, which subsequently led to the first tracking study by Brodeur et al., where they used Argos satellite transmitters to track 4 birds that were caught up in this same area. And this gave us a little bit more insight into the movements of these birds. So we had a glimpse of what eagles might be doing on wintering grounds, also from information from Wisconsin and northern Illinois by the father of radio telemetry, Bill Cochran, and I call him his trusty sidekick, Arlo Rame. These guys were crazy. Bill developed the very first radio transmitter, which you have to follow around with an antenna. And he and Arlo would drive like crazy across Illinois, following birds with their car. For this golden eagle, they followed it a bit with a plane, and they followed it for about 2 months, and which definitely is no easy task. And they also used a car, and they were able to keep picking it up, and they actually documented some of the feeding behavior, including prey attempts on ringneck pheasants. So these studies are kind of provide that base of scientific knowledge to build on, and it also left a lot of mysteries to understand. So, like I said, we started tracking eagles in 2006, and what's going to happen on this map is that states will light up as we have started trapping birds in those states. And you'll notice that my kids get bigger also as our data set gets bigger. In 2009, we started working with Jeff Cooper in Virginia and Mark Martell and Scott Mayhews in Wisconsin. And we started seeing different patterns in our movements. In 2010, our daughter Willow was born. In 2012, or where am I at? 2012, we had another partner in Maryland, and we started trapping in the Southeast in 12 and 13 and 14. And we start seeing our data set grow over time. Let's say in 2012, that's also when I got my PhD on this project. But as we trap in different places, we're starting to see different patterns of movement and different migration corridors, et cetera. And in 2024, this is my last map. This year, Maine will light up when I make a map for 2025. So not only did our kids grow over this time, but so did the Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group and our data set, and with that, our body of knowledge on this species. So in order to understand risk eagles face from wind energy, you have to have an understanding of their flight behavior. So I don't know if you can see the golden eagles, but they're using the updrafts off of this ridge to fly. And this is in the Altamont Pass. I took this last spring when we were out there studying burrowing owls. And this wind turbine, I have to say, has been shut off because of the presence of these eagles. But so you have to know something about their behavior, their flight behavior, to kind of inform this risk from wind energy. So I'm just going to give you a quick primer on flight that eagles use. First, of course, there's powered flight. People also call it flapping flight. And there are other types of flight are all grouped under what we call subsidized flight. And for eagles, so that means that their flight is somehow subsidized so that they're using less energy to fly. For eagles, they primarily use thermal soaring, followed by gliding, and then orographic soaring. Eagles soar in thermal updrafts, and that's when the air is heated by the ground, by the warm Earth's surface, and it causes that air to rise. And as air rises, the eagles circle and rise up in the thermal. Once they get to the top, they'll glide off to the next one. Then they'll also use called orographic soaring. Other people call it slope soaring, but that happens when wind is deflected by the topography and creates upward motion of the air that birds will use to subsidize their flight. So this is what makes the Ridge and Valley region of central Pennsylvania and of the Appalachians a type of superhighway for migrating raptors, like Dan Balsky and Dave Brandis described in their paper. The wind is also what makes it good for wind energy development. So when we first started tagging eagles, we were using Argos GPS telemetry units. They send data over satellites way up in space, which meant because they have to send them a very long distance, they have a lot of big power requirement. They can only send a little bit of data. And we soon realized that we could only get a few points each day during migration. And if we really wanted to understand flight behavior, we needed better technology than what existed, or we were going to have to change our questions. So despite talking with all the existing telemetry companies, none of them can help us. So typical of my husband, Mike, he said, well, I'll just make a transmitter that does that. And so he did. It took him about a year or so before he developed the first prototype. And now it's a company called Cellular Tracking Technologies that's based in Cape May. But by developing this transmitter, it's a GSM GPS, so it sends data over the cell phone network, which means it doesn't have to transmit very far. It takes much less power, so you can collect a heck of a lot more data. It also means that when they go north out of cell phone coverage, that their data has to be stored on board, and they have to wait to get it back until they come back. We were able to collect hundreds of times the amount of data as their satellite units. And these new units were really key to understanding the influence of topography and weather on flight behavior and ultimately risk from wind energy development. So this map just illustrates the difference between the two technologies. The black triangles are the satellite telemetry points we would get, and the colored points are the GSM telemetry, and those points are about 30 seconds apart. So we ultimately didn't just know where they went, but we knew how they got there, and that was key. So indeed, back then, we can identify thermal soaring and gliding from these 30-second data, kind of based on the L shape of the track and the distance between points. So you can identify the wind direction, the thermal will drift with the wind and the bird will drift in that thermal. So you get kind of this L shape depending, and the shape differs depending on the direction of the wind. And now we can get resolution much higher, up to 1 second on a track, and see exactly how many circles an eagle makes in a thermal. And then we can measure things like thermal depth and strength and so much more.
What kind of elevation climb is that?
It's probably a couple 100 meters. I have to look, but it could be more than that. We can also see orographic soaring, as illustrated here, where an eagle's flying along the west slope of a ridge and catching these updrafts. You can see just how it's hugging that ridge. So when we started in 2009, our study area was Pennsylvania. So we created a geofence around Pennsylvania, and within that geofence, that's where we were collecting these high resolution data. We knew that turbines were typically built on top of ridges, and that risk would be linked to how eagles were flying. So one of the first things we did with these data was to link them to different landforms, link them to flight altitude, to topography. And what you can see here is that eagles flying along summits and cliffs were flying at lower flight altitudes than those that were flying over side slopes, hills, and flats. So a lot of these points ended up being right within that rotor swept zone. So suggesting those were dangerous places to put wind turbines. We then linked the flight behavior to wind speed. Here you can see in the left panel that height band. So height band is the difference between the minimum and maximum flight altitude over a certain time period. That height band changes less as wind speeds increase. And in the right panel, flight altitude is lower when height band changes less. So this means that when wind speeds are higher, eagles are using orographic soaring. Now, most of us, if you watch birds at hawk watches, know this from watching them. But if you want to look at broader spatial scales to estimate risk from turbines, you really need data that covers a broad spatial scale. And this is one of the things that the telemetry data gave us. It gave us insights into patterns of flight behavior beyond a few locations. And so these linkages set up hypotheses that flight altitude response is indicative of changing behavior by eagles. That is, they're switching from use of thermals to orographic updraft and vice versa. So when eagles use these subsidized flight modes, they reduce the energetic cost of flight. And we think that the preferred mode of flight is thermal soaring because it's faster, especially when thermals are strong. So if you look at the top graph, you can see that over the same distance indicated by the spacing of the 30-second GPS locations, eagles are flying much further when they're soaring and gliding than when they're using orographic updrafts. But thermals are not always available. So eagles will switch to orographic soaring if they can to reduce that cost of flying. But they can only do that if topography supports orographic soaring. So eagles can benefit by flying along the Appalachians because if the weather changes, they have two different types of subsidized flight that they can use to keep migrating. This is probably a reason also why we see golden eagles wintering in higher numbers in areas with higher topographic relief. They can benefit from the ability to use both types of flight rather than relying only on thermal soaring and gliding like they would have to do in flatter areas. Because if a thermal breaks down in a flatter area, then they either have to stop flying or rely on something like powered flight, which uses more energy. So we also looked at conditions that influence thermal development and saw that these differ between spring and fall migration. So these graphs show conditions when the different age classes of eagles, that's juvenile, subadult, and adult, were migrating during spring and fall. The best lifted index is an indicator of atmospheric stability. In a stable atmosphere with a higher best lifted index, thermal development is suppressed. And we found that best lifted index was higher in fall, meaning that thermals were more suppressed. We also found that downward shortwave radiation flux, which is a measure of heating of the Earth's surface, is also lower during fall than spring migration. And interestingly, you can see that adults migrate at a time when thermal updrafts are less available in spring compared to young birds that move later. So we found that eagles are affected by weather at the individual scale. Here you can see that birds actively migrating, when birds were actively migrating, they selected times when downward solar radiation conditions were higher and supporting thermal development, which is needed for that soaring flight and reducing that cost of migration. But age is also an important predictor of timing of spring migration. And here you can see that migration is staggered, especially in spring, by age class. So the adults will start heading north much earlier than subadults and juvenile birds. But in fall, they're all kind of mixed together. Yeah, there it goes. So adults actually improve their fitness by arriving earlier on the breeding grounds, but they don't want to arrive too early. They want to arrive before there's enough food available for them to eat. So this means that they're migrating during suboptimal thermal conditions. So there's a trade-off in that fitness benefit of moving earlier when maybe it takes more energy to do so. On the other hand, younger birds likely benefit by waiting to migrate to reduce those energetic costs of migration when thermal development is better. So you can see from this animation that there's no age-related pattern in fall. Thus, all birds are conserving energy during fall migration because there's really no benefit to them to arrive on the wintering grounds at a specific time. So not only do conditions affect timing when eagles choose to migrate, but the different conditions also affect their flight behavior. When we examined the different flight behaviors, we found that the proportion of time spent in these behaviors differed between seasons. Eagles use more orographic soaring in fall, but thermal soaring was essentially the same between seasons. However, note that gliding is lower in fall than in spring. So why might this occur? This occurs, we think, because thermals are weaker in fall and stronger in spring. Thus, during spring, they're reaching a much higher altitude, so birds can stay in them longer. And when they can glide off for a longer distance. And during fall, they're lower and they're closer together, so they're not making as much. Their cross-country speeds are lower in fall than they would be in spring. So these differences in behavior and weather ultimately influence how eagles fly during the different seasons. And their flight is much lower during fall and also winter than during spring migration. So a lot of times these birds are much higher than, say, a wind turbine would be at the same time, even in the same place, just because of the difference in conditions. And these conditions also influence where they fly, and that is reflected in what we see at hawk watches, represented by those yellow stars. During March, migration is really concentrated. This is the ridge and valley in here. It's really concentrated in the ridge and valley, and then it becomes more dispersed in April and May as those thermal development is better and birds start moving outside of that region. But the dispersed migration isn't only because of weather, but also because of age and learning. So a lot of these young birds represented in red, they'll just head due north. So first time they've headed north, back to their back to the breeding areas, and they don't really have remember or know where to go. So they just have a kind of a compass that tells them to go north. What they don't realize is that all the Great Lakes are up there as well. And then when they hit those Great Lakes, they don't like to cross them. Instead, they'll follow follow the shorelines. But next year, when they are subadults, they'll remember that, and then they start migrating more northeast through the ridge and valley. And again, from then on. So getting back to what started this whole project, we were able to use some of the knowledge we gained to better understand risk to eagles from wind energy. And our first application, part of my dissertation, was to identify high-risk areas, as you can see here in the warmer colors, the reds and yellows and oranges. So those are the areas that eagles would be at high risk from wind energy development. And we've also used this approach in different areas of the East as well. And we could also identify high and low risk facilities. So the low risk facilities are those with green, and the pie charts are just the number of turbines in the different risk classes. And what you can see, importantly, is that this Allegheny Mountains region has the lowest risk turbines to eagles, because they tend to be more flying at lower altitudes through the ridge and valley and the northern plateaus region. And then we also could link risk to individual or existing or proposed wind turbines to identify individual high-risk turbines. Here are the ones in orange. And then we could use the model to suggest siting modifications to reduce risk to eagles. And this framework that we developed at East has been the basis for projects in the West as well, and also for projects with bald eagles in the upper Midwest, and as well as much bigger modeling effort to be used across the country. So a big gap in knowledge when we started this project had everything to do with winter. We had no idea what was going on. So people would see these birds migrating south, and that was it. Hardly any were seen during winter. And if we have 5,000 eagles somehow just disappearing, they're not all showing up in wetlands, I know that much. So this is another area that we wanted to explore. So our telemetry data started to give us a clue about where golden eagles were spending their time during winter, and it would surprise pretty much everyone. So this map here shows the movements of a golden eagle over the course of a single day. The points are 30 seconds apart. So we pretty much know where it was every moment of the day. And you can see he was almost exclusively using heavily forested areas. That's where people rarely are during winter, which means these eagles are pretty much hiding out in plain sight. You probably have no idea that there are probably lots of eagles in the pinelands right now too. We find them on camera traps, but people typically don't see them, and this is why, right? They're hiding in the trees. We also looked at home range, and when we looked at that, we found that home ranges were heavily forested with only about 20% open cover. This is from data up to 2015. And we also found that their home ranges tended to be located in areas with high topographic relief, as illustrated by the proportion of slope in their home ranges. So when we looked at forest structure derived from LiDAR data and how that influenced selection in the New Jersey pinelands, we found that eagles were selecting areas with low bulk canopy density. That means not much below, not much vegetation below a certain level. With respect to the understory. So you can see here in these violin plots showing canopy bulk density measured at different canopy heights for our GPS points. So the data, the blue is perched and stationary points, and the red is flight points, and then the gray on both graphs are what's available to them. So what you can see is that golden eagles favored a more open understory that is lower canopy bulk density when perched and stationary and also in flight. And this preference for open understory was significant, less than 6 meters height for all the telemetry data and less than 5 meters high for perched or stationary locations and 8 meters for flight locations. So these results support our hypothesis that an open understory would be preferred because it facilitates visual observation of prey. And resource managers can use this information potentially to use prescribed fire or other methods to open the understory and thus promote habitat that golden eagles were found to occupy. When we began this project, again, the distribution of this eastern population was poorly described by rangers. This is the Birds of the World range map from the 2002 golden eagle account. It suggests that there's few, if any, golden eagles in the east. We tried to improve that perception in one of our papers on the status of golden eagles in the east, which we published in 2012. And we based this on ecoregion boundaries, our telemetry data, and then we incorporated some of that MILSAP and VANA data to get a better idea of the distribution. And then the 2020 Birds of the World account was a better fit than the previous version, but it's missing some of the important wintering habitat for golden eagles, which is mainly the Appalachian Mountains. Apparently they're absent from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia, which are most of the most important places for them during the winter. And so, not to mention there's a lot of missing in the breeding areas across Nunavut, Manitoba, Quebec, and Labrador. And my name is on this map, but we didn't have any real inputs into it. So that led us to try to give a better description of the empirical distribution of golden eagles. So I reviewed literature, community science data, telemetry data, Christmas bird count data, and documented county level distribution of golden eagles throughout the winter. And what you can see is that they really occupy a large proportion of the eastern US, and people still don't realize that. And then Jenny McCabe also estimated the relative probability of occurrence by month. And you can see here how the Appalachian Mountains have a very high probability of occurrence of golden eagles during January. So now what drives these distributions is resources. And quite frankly, this may be one of the most important food resources for eagles, at least in part of their range. And although Our friends in Minnesota were successful in using live prey to capture eagles. We found that it was much easier and less time consuming to use carrion. And sites like this are not uncommon, almost anywhere we trapped. These camera traps on deer carcasses allowed us to trap eagles pretty much anywhere and collaborate and connect with folks across the Eastern Range, especially state wildlife management personnel on the ground. It also allowed us to build a very large camera trapping network. And this insight and our success luring eagles to bait led to a camera trapping project in the East to document that wintering distribution as well. So we gathered millions of photographs, we're still gathering some, from camera traps, and we're able to estimate detection rates. And of course, the highest probability, highest rates of detection were in the Appalachian Mountains. We also use the camera trap data to look at differences in wintering sites among age classes. In some migratory species, there's a segregation of the sexes or latitudinal segregation of age classes. And these graphs show that show latitude on the x-axis and daily and seasonal rates of detection of different age classes. And you can see that there's really no relationship between age and latitude. That means they're all mixing together. So these camera traps can provide a wealth of information on distribution, but they can also be quite entertaining. This is one of my favorites. She's just beautiful, isn't she? Does she really like to show off? So much so that I call her America's next top model. We also captured many interesting interactions. So many, I could talk for hours about this stuff. Like the behaviors of this female, she actually has a tag on her now. She appears to be placing a branch on this deer carcass, like a bobcat might. Bobcats will cover carcasses with leaves to hide them. We don't really know what she was doing, but it was pretty cool to catch that on camera. And if you have video, you can see some really cool interactions like this. This is in Arkansas. And my favorite part is coming up, the little sneak attack. So few people in this state actually realize how many golden eagles are there. At this site, within like about a 5-mile radius, we had at least 9 different individuals. That's a very small area. And nobody would know it unless we had these camera traps out. So Mike and I, my husband and I, have spent thousands of hours sitting in a blind, waiting to trap. You can't just go away. You have to sit there and watch until a bird comes in so you can catch him. And we sat watching and listening to eagles. And one thing that we noticed was that at almost all of our sites, that some birds appeared to be acting like a pair. They were engaged in pair bonded behavior like these 2 birds in Kentucky. We tried in vain for many years to catch both birds of a pair. And we got really close one time. This is in Northwest Alabama, at a place called Freedom Hills Wildlife Management Area. The female escaped. So we caught the female. What's really cool about this is the male flew up to the side of the field and he watched us get her out the whole time. He didn't fly off. We came back about an hour later to release her. We let her go and there's a gully on the side. We let her go and he was perched down there and they immediately started calling back and forth to one another. Just really cool stuff. People don't think that eagles migrate together or winter together if they're, and so this was really neat to see. They all down here, sitting next to one another. So in 2018, we thought we were gonna be a little closer. We captured a male at Bernheim Forest in Kentucky. And 2 years later, we captured a female that we thought could be his mate. They left at the same time from Bernheim, like exactly the same time. But he headed west towards Duluth, Minnesota, and she went north to the Mackinac Straits in Michigan. So we're like, darn it, they're not a pair. So remember, I told you we have these cell phone, the units can only send data over cell phone network. And so we don't get data from where they breed. But when they headed south and dumped all their summer data, we saw this. They were indeed a breeding pair. And they were breeding in Wapaska National Park, just outside of Churchill, Manitoba. And they only discovered breeding eagles in Wapask in 2000, in all of Manitoba in 2011. So they didn't even realize they had breeding eagles until, 13 years ago, 14 years ago. But what's really cool is that these two birds somehow meet back up. They spend time apart during migration. I think it's because she needs a break. But this is just super exciting and super interesting. And what's even more interesting about this story is that our collaborator, Andrew Berry, who's at Bernheim in Kentucky, reached out to the folks in Wapask National Park. And last winter, they found her nest. They flew over it last June, and they got this shot of her sitting. She's either brooding or sitting on an egg. And then they went back in July and got this shot. Now, I know lots of people who study birds on their breeding grounds, and so this isn't probably not that big of a deal, but for us that study birds on their wintering grounds, it's really amazing. And after 17 years of studying these birds, I finally got to see one of our actual birds that we held and one of their nests. And before, I only dreamt what they might have looked like based on aerial imagery. So I may not get to see all the eagle nests in person, but our collaborator in Quebec, our collaborators, they've documented a slew of nests, and those data and our telemetry data were recently used by a graduate student, Maury Maynard, to characterize resource selection across different scales. And here you can see maps of relative probability of selection at the landscape, foraging, and nesting scale, and then all three combined. So just pointing out that the darker green areas are very high probability of eagles selecting them. And if we looked at some of the details, Lori found that nests in Quebec and Labrador were situated at relatively lower elevations than the surrounding landscape, which is essentially what my colleague Carol McIntyre, who studies golden eagles in Denali, she also sees. They're not nesting at the very top, they're nesting like mid elevation. So that's neat to see. And they're also foraging in areas with higher terrain ruggedness and nesting more often on west-facing slopes with lower forest cover. Oh, when I went through and I compiled all the winter distribution data, I also got really interested in breeding reports. So I knew, so most of the golden eagles that are going up north, all the juveniles are gone probably by May 15th. So if you get any birds in June or July, something's going on. So we knew that the last breeding reports in Maine were in the 1990s, and the last chick was produced in the mid-1980s. Outside of the Northeast, there are 3 confirmed historic nests. The closest one to us is on the Susquehanna and just south of Harrisburg. But there's also one in Tennessee and Wisconsin. And despite the fact that goldens rarely bred outside of the Northeast, some very well-intentioned people decided to reintroduce goldens in the Appalachians. So from the mid-80s to the mid-2000s, eagles were released in Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee, which resulted in these observations that you see on the map during the summer. So these introductions led to breeding in Georgia and Tennessee and possibly Virginia. In 2012, a recently fledged eagle was found in Tennessee. It died in rehab. Then in 2015, a very young eagle was found in early August, definitely before young birds are departing their natal territories up north. It was rehabbed, released with a transmitter, and isotope and other evidence strongly suggests that it probably came from near where it was found in Southwest Virginia. Unfortunately, it disappeared after about 6 months. And since then, no young eagles or nests have been found in the lower 48 eastern US. So this brings us to our final story about genetics. So Maria Wheeler, who's a graduate student at Duquesne University, did a study for her dissertation to look at genetic differentiation between eastern and western golden eagles. Her conclusion was that there was little genetic differences between them, either historically or in the contemporary population. And one of Maria's conclusions was that there might be mixing of the populations. And as I was putting this together, it dawned on me that there probably is almost certainly mixing going on. And her samples from Minnesota are probably from breeding birds in Western Canada, and our telemetry data support that. So a more recent analysis by Jackie Doyle indicated that there is evidence for population differentiation. So she found something different than Maria did, and she used SNP data, or single nucleotide polymorphism data, to provide a snapshot of the genetic structure in North American golden eagle populations. And her pairwise FST analysis, which compares genetic distance between populations, showed that significant population differentiation was evident in Alaska versus eastern populations, Alaska versus western, and eastern versus western. So why the conflicting studies? One of Maria's conclusions that there might be mixing, and we've long thought that if mixing was going to occur, it would be on the western margin of the eastern wintering area. And as I was putting this together, it dawned on me that there's two big differences between these two studies, and that's the location of samples. Notice that Jackie's samples did not include any birds from Minnesota, and Maria's samples from Minnesota probably are from birds breeding in Western Canada. And if we look at our telemetry data, they indeed support this. This 100-degree longitude line is the line that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife uses to classify east versus west populations. But as you can see here, I think that the genetic data may support, we have both western and eastern birds that are wintering together in the western part of the eastern range. I think that's pretty cool, and it could really have profound management implications as well. So I've talked a lot about the biology and behavior of these birds and the direct consequences for conservation. The eagles also face a couple of threats because they feed on carrion. One problem that we identified very early on was incidental capture in mammal traps set on or near carrion. And people use this to catch mammals for their fur. And there's a lot of it that goes on in all throughout the continent. We've had at least 4 eagles that were killed in traps, and others that have been caught in injury. These 3 bald eagles that you see here were found because our telemetry data indicated that a golden eagle might be dead or injured or something. So an officer went out in Quebec and found these birds that our eagle had left. So presumably, hopefully without a snare caught on him somewhere. So the problem is illustrated here in Quebec by where the gray lines are showing our telemetry tracks, and the stars indicate where 69 eagles have been caught as bycatching traps. And this is the same region where our telemetry birds have been killed. Quebec has undertaken some efforts to educate trappers to try to reduce that bycatch, and we need to be doing that same thing here. I'll point out that really above here, there's no trapping going on because those are First Nations people, and they don't do this kind of trapping. So once eagles get through that area, they tend to be safe from that kind of effect. Another major problem that eagles face here and everywhere from eating carrion is the incidental ingestion of lead from ammunition. So this just shows a sample of birds that we caught, and below the red line, it's considered to be exposure to lead or background exposure, and above it, it's considered exposed, like they consume some amount of lead. So every single bird that we catch, we take a blood sample from. And my good friend and colleague Vince Slavey, for his dissertation and subsequent publications, used our samples and the samples from many others to show that golden eagle populations are suppressed by about 1% annually, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's really the difference between a stable and a declining population. And so while this is disturbing, it's important to note that most hunters have no idea that this is happening. And education is really an important step to help solve this problem. So we've taken on the role to provide information and also to provide free non-lead ammo to reduce the amount of lead on the landscape and thus reduce eagle mortality from lead. Relationships that we've developed on the ground from all of our camera trapping and all of our physical trapping of eagles were really pivotal in us establishing relationships that allow us to do this work. We right now have a program going on in New York under Hunters for Eagle Conservation, where we want to distribute 10,000 boxes of lead-free ammo over the next 5 years. And then we have another program upcoming in Georgia starting this fall. We have some programs out west as well. At the 2019 meeting of the Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group, we began working on a conservation plan, kind of distilling all the information that we've collected over the last so many years. And in late 2023, we finally published that plan. It was the culmination of a lot of hard work and herding of 43 cats to get it done. I personally am really proud to have been a part of this group and to have gotten to spend the last 19 years of my life studying these birds. We've learned so much about this population. But every single time we go out into the field and we're putting a new unit on, we learn just a little bit more. So that learning is not stopping. Like I said at the beginning, it's not been done in a vacuum. We have many, many funding sources. We just started our project in Maine. I'm super excited about that. And I really hope that I can go up to Maine and find a nesting golden eagle at some point. I also have to thank my master's and PhD advisor, Dr. Rob Brooks. You can't do this kind of work without good support. Rob took a chance on hiring me in 2003 and taking me on as a grad student in 2004. In 2007, he wholeheartedly agreed to be my PhD advisor, even though he's a wetland ecologist, but he was awesome. He was extremely special, and he supported me when I had Phoebe, my first daughter, in 2006 during my master's, and Willow in 2010 during my PhD. And for any of us to make it in this field, we need support along the way. We also need the support of our families. I was very fortunate to do much of this work with my husband and to have the support of my mom and 2 very understanding and supportive kids, because I leave them every winter to go trap golden eagles. Once they started school, they couldn't come anymore. I want to thank you all for listening. I hope it inspires you to find your golden opportunity.
Any questions?
So I'm only asking because I do have a bird at home, but after you extract them, are there any safety measures or precautions that you guys need to take for each, or like any type of things used to subdue the bird?
The most important thing with an eagle is to hold on to its legs. We put a hood on their head to that we put a hood, they can't see, and then some of them will like actually fall asleep. If we're putting a telemetry unit on them, we also put little booties on their feet that protects them and it protects us because we have to manipulate them quite a bit. But the most important thing with any raptor is to hold their feet.
So that in New York, you've been trying to get hunters to use lead-free ammo.
Yeah.
Is there a significant price difference between the lead-free ammo and normal ammo that hunters are more biased to switching?
I think there is a little bit of a difference. Nine, we're physically going through photos. But now that there's AI and this wildlife insights can go through all these photos and help you identify.
Your telemetry data showed holes over the Great Lakes and even St. Lawrence Seaway. Is it that the birds are avoiding the Great Lakes and you said the juveniles tend to skirt around the shoreline? Or is it because of a lack of technology in the radio signals? No updrafts, no prey items, why?
So I actually have another study that I didn't show any of this, but we are studying eagles crossing water. That's the name of the study. Because we're interested in offshore wind. They will cross short distances, but tend to be not really long, and the conditions have to be good. I do see like there's I don't know what the name of the bay on the western side of Lake Superior, but we will get birds that cross that bay. We'll get some birds that cross the St. Lawrence. But oftentimes they actually get trapped on the Gas Bay Peninsula, and they'll circle and circle until they get far enough south that they feel or west of the hill that they can cross.
So you think it's weather related, not prey related?
No, it's updraft related, almost certainly. Like, so if we have bald eagles that will cross like 100+ kilometers of
Right.
Lake Superior, no problem. They'll just go. But they're built differently. They're built more like a long distance runner, whereas a golden eagle is built more like a sprinter. That makes sense.
So you showed some, there's some data for the Western populations, and I assume there's probably a fair amount of that, but I'm also curious what do we know about like Eurasian populations and how those compare to the North American ones?
Like genetically, or
Well, or
like,
even the data about
behaviorally?
their behavior, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at those data. I can say that I have trapped golden eagles in Sweden, and Sweden is a lot like Maine and southern Quebec as far as habitat's concerned. They probably use the habitat similarly, but there's not been a lot of comparisons between the different populations, honestly.
What are their numbers like in Eurasia compared to similarly? tens of
Well, in
thousands?
places like Kazakhstan and southern Russia, there's a ton of them.
Oh,
I mean, it just kind of depends where you are. There's a good nesting population in the Alps, like I said, in Sweden, northern Sweden, there's quite a few birds. And Sweden's really neat because they go out and band all the nestlings in different places every year, which is really cool to see. But yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about the numbers. The smallest population is in Ethiopia, and then it's a very tiny area that they occupy, and then there's another very small population in Japan. Those are the two smallest.
I thought the modeling of different sites for the windmills was really quite cool as a rational way to like address, you know, power distribution and the safety of the animals. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more broadly to the relative risk of the windmills versus climate change in general to these populations, and like which is a bigger worry, if you will.
For me, when I think about golden eagles, think of it, they're a top predator. They don't produce many young, you know, they have long generation times. And so if you lose golden eagles to any kind of threat, then you can end up having consequences like lead poisoning. What we see in the east is we don't see a lot of collisions with wind turbines. The landscape's very different from the west in that it's much harder to find a dead eagle because the pads are really small, trees are all around the turbines. You go out west, they have big open areas, and they find in some areas like the Altamont and in Wyoming, many fatalities. And for golden eagles, they are highly adaptive. Like they span the entire, they have a circumpolar distribution across the northern hemisphere, and they can adapt to different types of areas. They occupy so many different types of land cover, from desert to tundra and boreal forest. And so climate change is probably going to be much less of an effect on a species like that. And when you see all the fatalities that are occurring, that's occurring to a level, and with the build out that was expected on hold, it could be very consequential for that population. As a matter of fact, in the Altamont Pass, you can see that there's population level effects because you have subadults that are occupying nests in the highest density breeding area in the entire world for golden eagles. If you go within the Altamont where all the wind turbines are, you get subadults occupying nests. Whereas if you get out of there and you don't have those same mortalities, you only have adults that occupy nests.
Do you find a difference in risk for different turbine designs or anything?
Well, there probably is a lot of, right now, the main turbine designs are, we had originally those little bitty turbines, which a lot of birds were perching on, and so those have higher risk for some species, but they've done some repowering. The Altamont is where we have the most information that we're still seeing high mortalities at these big turbines as we were at the smaller ones. So maybe if it was a completely different design, they have some that wave or some that spin vertically.
If students wanted to get involved in this kind of work, do you have any suggestions for them?
Well, I started doing field work, and that's where I caught my first golden eagle. I worked for Hawkwatch International. And so I think that the best way to get involved is to get experience in the field and learn about it more in that way. And then you can also meet people that are doing the work, and eventually professors who might be able to hire you on as a master's or PhD. That's how I got involved, just doing.
Are there internships around?
There's a lot of seasonal positions available, like Cape May Raptor Banding Project has a seasonal technician usually, and then they also have seasonals that do work at the Hawkwatch or the Sea Watch, our interpretive naturalists. There's lots of, like I said, Hawkwatch International hires people to do counts, and some people do trapping. There's lots, and like when I was looking for jobs, I would look at, you call them orange jobs. I don't know if orange jobs exist anymore, but also Texas A&M has a wildlife job list or that can help point you to seasonal positions.
When you guys capture these eagles, like you said, you draw blood from every one of you captured.
Mhm.
Do you have like veterinarians that help you, or like avian techs, or do you guys just do it?
I do it.
That's cool.
I mean, I worked as a vet tech for a few years. And then always been tasked with, and I actually like making those.
Is there an ammunition exchange program in New York?
In New York, not exchange, it's a rebate program.
Okay.
So if you go Hunters for Eagle Conservation New York, if you're from New York or you have family in New York, they can sign up to get the rebate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I live here, but my entire family's in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah,
And you were talking about that, I said, surely my father would never use this lead ammunition. So I just texted him real quick, expecting him to say, no, he goes, oh yeah, I use lead, copper cover. And I was like, oh, you cannot use that anymore. So I'll just send him and my brother and everybody else.
yeah, do. I mean, it's really difficult in New York to run that program because of all the laws surrounding it.
Yeah.
So definitely been a challenge. Much easier to do it in a place like Wyoming where you can mail people their ammunition. Anybody else?
Okay, so golden eagles seem awesome, but they're one species and there's lots of other birds.
Right.
So I'm gonna ask you to talk about something that maybe you're not an expert on, but it strikes me that you're doing the modeling and you're determining where the wind turbines would be good for this one species,
Right.
but by shifting it over 100 kilometers, maybe now you're just putting another species at risk.
Right.
So I'm wondering, how many other groups are there out there like your group? And do you have a lot of crosstalk and are you working together? It's a lot of data and complicated, but.
Right, so there's two primary groups of animals that Fish and Wildlife and wind energy companies are concerned about. Eagles, because they're protected under the Golden Eagle Protection Act. Golden eagles specifically because their populations are much lower than bald eagles. And then bats. And what we don't know is what the intersection between bats and eagles is.
Yeah, that's a good PhD project.
Right. Yeah. Bats are probably, there's actually, bats are probably more in danger from wind turbines than anything else. Anybody else?
Thank you so much.
Oh.